Excellent. So thank you, Moj. Thank you, Joseph. Thank you, Monica, for being here for session 11. Woo! Follow up with leads. You guys are the most consistent. Moj has really been plugging away. I think you should win an award. I think you've literally been to the most trainings, and that's huge. Because just like we talked about the very first class, make learning based being the foundation of your lead generation, right? It's hard to talk to people about what you do and what we do if you don't know what to talk about, what to share, right? I mean, for all real estate is, all businesses is, all sales is being able to relate a story to somebody, right? And if you can pull your own stories from your own experience or borrow stories like Monica and I did in our early 20s, late teens, early 20s till now, we just kind of adapt other experiences and stories to connect with other people. And we're into session 11. We're still in pillar 3, lead follow-up. Number 11, follow with all leads. We're going to talk about learn lead conversion. And it's crazy because a lot of our trainings outside of Ignite is all about conversion. How to convert a lead to an appointment, improve your conversion rate. So the more people you talk to, the more appointments you get, or the fewer people you talk to, as you get better and better at your skill set and your questions, you would have a much higher conversion rate as well. Recaps and ahas. Quote of the day: the effort you give to converting leads must match the effort you give to generating them. So you'll hear constantly on the morning call, on the sales meeting, events that we go to, they're all about lead generate, prospect. There are very few people will talk to you about following up those leads, right? And there's 2 forms of follow-up. The first form of follow-up is just touching the quarterly call, right? You're just following up to see how Joseph's doing, following up to see how Monica's doing. Her birthday's in January 25th, so you're probably gonna call her January 24th, right? And wish her a happy birthday. Is that considered a prospect? Maybe not. She's not on the market right now, but it might be considered a lead follow-up. You're touching that relationship. The other side of lead follow-up is Monica said, hey, follow up with me in the start of the year because I'm going to be ready to potentially buy a house after I do my taxes. Awesome. Well, I'm still going to call for her birthday, but I'm also going to follow up about her interest in the house, right? So it's not just a one and done call and just waiting for someone to say, oh, I'm interested. You're going to touch base with a recurring call or email or text message with all of the people, preferably a call. Or again, depending on how we talked about this in prior Ignite classes, what's their mode of communication? Is it social media communication? Is it text? Is it email? Is it phone call? I would err on the side of at least making 1 phone call a year. Is just a higher level of the relationship outside of seeing someone face to face. Right, I'm going to move this down so everyone can see this. This is the lead conversion process, and this is right out of Shift. So everything, again, I've repeated this before, that the bulk of Ignite, this version of it, is straight out of Shift, right? And in this whole book, we haven't even gone past page 100. Consistently getting every possible appointment from the leads you generate isn't complicated, but it does require preparation, practice, and purposeful action. So you're going to capture however you captured a client or the relationship, whether you know them off the bat, open house, maybe you're doing calls, maybe it's someone you met, through networking. However you meet, you're going to connect. You're going to win someone over through conversation, through connection, through understanding what their goals are, asking what their goals are. You're going to cultivate a relationship. 9 times out of 10, mostly, you're going to go into cultivating. Now, other times when you connect, maybe you're connecting on a call like a for sale by owner, expired, notice of default, maybe on that first call or even at the door, depending on the situation, you may go into closing for an appointment. It's not closing a sale. You're not closing right then and there for their business, but you are going to close for the next piece, which may be an appointment. And I would even argue after closing for an appointment, you would double back just a little bit to go into cultivating for a relationship, right? Either way, we're always cultivating. Even when we're connecting with people, we may spend the bulk of our time following up on that relationship through cultivation, right? Like if you meet Monica and I, whether you door knock our door or you call us, whether you know us personally, you'll quickly know that our lives revolve around our kids, right? And the likelihood right now of us selling our house could be there, right? But we would have to know a ton before we commit to doing that, right? A lot of uncertainty around the market. We have our youngest kid is 3. You know, you have to find and cultivate a relationship with us, ask more questions of us, and we might not give everything on the first call or the first door knock, especially if we don't know somebody, right? So we may be one of those that you cultivate with us for a little while. Now, let's say there's a different scenario. Let's say you connect with us through an attorney, and the attorney is our divorce attorney, not a divorce attorney, and we need to sell the house. And then it's a different type of cultivate. Now, you still cultivated a relationship, but you can cultivate it with our divorce attorney, right? So however you kind of meet that client, it just depends on the scenario. And Mo, Joseph, if you guys have questions about those type of scenarios where you're like, hey, well, if I have somebody, I think they're interested. I mean, can you like help me convert? Thumbs up, absolutely, right? Other parts of it, you're gonna have 3 pipelines, and we kind of hit on this the last Ignite. Possible business, I would consider that the maybes. Probable business, these are the ones who said, hey, definitively, yes, this is what I want to do, and here's why. Profitable business would be the ones that you've already signed. You know, they're signed agreement, they're in your pipeline, your escrow pipeline, or their marketing pipeline that you have signed in your yard, they're sellable listings, they're sellable buyers or viable buyers, meaning that they're really out there with you looking at homes like Mo. We've got essentially an investor buyer for most of Orange County, which is awesome. Shifting gears over to how to convert a lead to an appointment. Capturing is defined as collecting the minimum amount of valid contact information of a potential buyer or seller. So capture would just be name, contact phone number, ideally an email address, and if they own a house, they're mailing their home address or mailing address, right? And keep in mind, if that's all you had, you can actually look up and find out they have more property, right? Mo, you work with Monica and I, if ever you're like, hey, well, if I think this guy's an investor, can you look up their information? Absolutely, we'll teach you how to do it through Realist. I believe you're with SRAR too.
No, I'm with them. It's the same.
Oh, same thing, yeah.
I can look all the property.
There you go.
If it's in their name, and if it's not in their trust.
Right, and if you find one house, you probably find a trust, and then you can reverse engineer find them through the trust. But
That's true, but sometimes they have different names or different trusts.
true,
Unfortunately, I listened to an attorney conversation about what's the legal that for this.
yeah, and you know, to that point, you know, you can find out some basic stuff about them and kind of build around it. But you want to capture minimal contact information, at least name, your spouse's name,
Or
email address, mailing that information, so you send them a thank you note or some timely information.
I think you made a good point. I never thought about that, but spouse's name would be also most important. And if you have a spouse's email, if you email it from the instant.
Right, I'll try to find out, like, I know I'll also try to find out to the degree if they have kids, you know, to some point. If it's a cold call and I'm calling and I notice Monica's owned the house for 20 years, I'll probably throw, maybe not an assumption, but I might throw a question out there. Hey, are your kids finalized with school, or maybe not that soon, but I'll always find out who else is the decision maker in that process, find out their spouse or anyone else involved.
That's a very good comment.
Yeah, conversation frameworks. So this is like some questions you can ask in order to kind of capture information, capture interest. Excuse me. If I were to need a contact, if I were to need to contact you, what would that number be? In fact, I would rephrase that because I'm assuming, let's say you're on the phone with them already. Hey, if I needed to text you, what's your preferred number to receive a text? Right? If I'm face to face with them, I wouldn't necessarily number. I would actually refrain asking for a phone number and saying, hey, what's the best way to text you? All right. And if they decide to give me a home number, that's fine. I'll take it. But if they can give me a cell number without me asking for a cell number, I'll take that even more. Right. If I found exactly what you're looking for, how could I contact you? And I would go back to how could I text you? If this is face to face at an open house, for example, or at a party, you know, we're hanging out, we do a lot of parties, you know, we're hanging out with family, friends, especially this time of year going into the holidays.
Oh, yeah.
You know, hey, Mo, we were able to find you that type of investment property that you may potentially buy a home or maybe even look into flipping. What's the best way to text you that link, right? Or text you that information, or connect with you after this party, right?
I think that's all good, but I think you have to give them a little bit of, my opinion, is give them a little bit of interest. I have some good value property that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You have to, if you go fishing, you have to give them a little hook, so.
That's true too. Like you
So
can,
they pay attention to them.
right, you can reframe it too and say, hey, I've got this one house that may pique your interest. Can't pull it up right now, but I'd love to text it over to you when I have a moment to search for it.
Exactly.
Yeah, or the information. I mean, we're basically just playing around with the words, but the capturing portion is really just the questions to gain interest, like you said, right? Like no one will just give you their information unless there's what's in it for them. With them, WIFIN.
What's in the.
Yeah.
company.
What's in it for me? You know? So that's kind of what it is. If I found out that information you were wanting, how could I get it to you? Sometimes that might be an email address. Sometimes that could be a mailing address. Honestly, I've only faxed paperwork once in real estate, which is crazy. Best practices for connection: embed your value proposition in the conversation. Role play and practice conversations. Know the outcome you want from a conversation before starting. Use questions to lead the conversation. So, for example, in this market, and then this actually doesn't necessarily take, but in open houses, there's like a 3-pronged thing that we used to say and still say, and we can role play a little bit. So, hey, Joseph, thank you so much for stopping by today. I really appreciate it and your time. Hey, before you go out there, I know you're going to meet a ton of agents, see a lot of houses, especially now. You saw like 40 signs, whatever the small talk is, right? Before you take off, do you mind if I share some tips with you that whether or not we work together, you can use on any house that you buy?
That's all I'm thinking about right here.
Awesome. Yeah, we got time. The first thing is you want to make sure your financing is rock solid. I know I asked earlier if you're doing cash or leverage finance, and you said finance. So make sure you're working with your lending partner and that everything from start to finish is accounted for, and that they have a game plan for you to either buy the rate down, negotiate closing costs, or maybe save you a little bit on your interest rate through a rate buy down. Sound fair?
That's fair.
Awesome. Number 2 is make sure that you have your realtor, whoever you decide to work with, can write the offer in such a way that it gets not only the attention of the listing agent, but also the attention of the seller without any harm to you as the buyer. Right? You want to maximize contingencies, those closing costs that I talked about mean that your realtor working hand in hand for a loan officer, and those 2 pieces go a long way. Fair enough?
Fair enough.
Awesome. And then lastly, you want to make sure you're partnered with a realtor that happens to know a good handful of the listing agents that are out there, or at least the agencies or offices that these homes are listed with. Most of these deals that we put together, yes, it helps that the client is super solid. It helps even more that there's a line of outstanding communication between your realtor and the listing agent representing the seller. And so, I'm fortunate enough to volunteer within our board of realtors. I'm fortunate enough to be with our office, Keller Williams, and we're connected to multiple Keller Williams around the area. A lot of the big brokerages and brands we work hand in hand with. Plus the smaller boutique brokerages through networking, we have that line of communication. With that being said, would you be open to reconnecting together on Tuesday after you've taken time to see all the houses, after you've taken some time to digest? Maybe we can bounce back some ideas to see how we're getting you closer to where you want to be.
Sure.
Awesome. And I took your number down as you wrote down 818, Is that the best number to get a hold of you?
That would be.
Awesome. And I'll just probably text you, right? Let me text you my number. Now you have my phone number. Oh, by the way, here's my card. Joseph, thank you so much. Have an awesome afternoon.
Great, thank
Right.
you.
And so, yeah, me too. Now that sounds like a lot to say, right? But just think of it 3, like they're talking about embedding your value proposition. Well, our value proposition would be that, hey, you know what, we're going to connect you. If you don't have a lender who does it, we will have a lending partner that can help fill that in. And most times, especially in this market, you're not going to have everyone fully approved. They're just looking. So by dropping that in there, they're like, ooh, I Googled and a lender, but I don't think I'm going to get that information. So now that's value proposition 1. If they have a lender, awesome. Are they doing all that? Maybe. If they don't have a lender, great. It sounds like this guy Philip may know somebody. Number 2, we're going to highlight writing the offer, whether it's me or someone else. Make sure your realtor can do this, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, right? And then lastly, whoever that realtor is, even if they are working with one, wow, I never thought about it, but is that person connected in this area that I want to buy in? right? So I'm planting some seeds of, man, this person knows a little bit, probably keep his information. Number two, I'm planting another seed of like, ooh, wow, I do work with them and his team. Yeah, they know what they're doing. And number three, if he has a realtor, I'm planting some seeds of doubt that, ooh, man, I don't know if my realtor got that, right? So there's some things happening. And then I know I've captured if he says yes to that closing question, which then, let's see if it gets into it. But if that actually would be like part of me closing, would be closing to cultivate for the next appointment, right? In this case, it'd be Tuesday when we do a follow-up, and never do it Monday. What I found with Monday, you have a lot of stuff going on as realtors.
That's true.
And then number two, Monday for the typical person, probably just as crazy. They got a day job or a night job, whatever, and they're just getting their kids in school, living life, paying bills, whatever. Tuesday just tends to be mellowed out. As realtors, we kind of cleared through all of our emails and messages, and we're kind of caught up, at least for a morning. At least for one day, we're caught up. And then hit the follow-up on a good Tuesday. 6 connecting questions is asking who are they, what do they need, what do they want or need to do, where do they want or need to do it, why do they want to meet, so basically who, what, where, why, when, and how they plan to do it, right? Those are real basic connection questions. Cultivate, you can't know or predict when they will come to a decision, but if you're reconnecting with them in a systematic way, you'll have a great chance of being there when they do. That's when you'll be able to close for an appointment. So now let's say you were truly just kind of like we practiced before, you're just kind of cruising the market. And we connected at that open house. I'm following up with you on Tuesday, and you're like, Philip, interest rates are really high right now. And I just have so much concern about the market. Hey, those are totally get it. Right. And I go through my little scenarios, and even at the end, you're like, oh no, it's not really for me right this moment. And here's why. Awesome. Hey, when's the best time for us to touch base when you feel like you're more ready for it? And you give me January, February, March, whatever. I'll schedule a date, and I'm going to follow up with you halfway through that time, especially with the holiday vote. And Joseph, Monica, we can always call and wish them happy holidays, right? So
I think that's a good idea. When I have a lead service where they send me clients for possibly looking. When I call them, it's like an initial cold call.
Oh yeah.
After all my expectations, I usually tell them when to expect me again. So that's always a good idea. So they can expect you. You're not calling out of rooms for their support. Always let them know. Can I call you in a week? What day would be good? Is it available in the morning, afternoon? Are you available Saturday? I always ask them 2 options. What is the best time to call?
100%. And and that is the part of the reconnecting in a systematic way. And sometimes, we use command and we just put them on a quarterly call, right? So the moment it comes in and we save it, I start a quarterly payment plan. So at a minimum, every 3 months, I'm calling them. And then on my opportunities list, I'll follow up with them during the holidays and stuff like that too.
Okay.
And they just become part of that recurring call dialogue. And remember, it takes like 10 to 15 calls, like connection calls, in order to close someone on a deal, right? Because it's all about timing in their lives, not with us. Like whenever we call, it's great, but for them to move, it's a matter of exactly time, and not necessarily market, but mainly timing. The market's whatever the market is. If timing's great, then awesome. They sell at such a high, right? If timing's off, then great. They still have to sell or buy, but now the market is just kind of translating into whatever their goals are.
I'd like to make a comment. I think in this time in our lives or in this study, more people are apt to text. So when I had a client that was getting their credit scores fixed up, or they didn't know what property they wanted to get. So yes, I would put them in the back burner, but I always call them around the holiday time, whether it's Labor Day or any other Thanksgiving or something like that. Always mention Thanksgiving. So I'm in their head around the holiday time, so they will remember me. And they told me, yeah, you're my agent, so I can call you back.
Yeah, absolutely.
But texting is better than emailing, I think, in this society, because most of the people who are buying these days are, I would say, millennial or that age group, and they're not into receiving emails. The email may check once a week, or maybe they forget, so the best result is to text 7 minutes.
Yeah, I agree. And I wish I were more systematic about the holiday stuff. I kind of waited and Mother's Day is here, it's Sunday, and I'm like rushing to copy and paste and text everyone with a mom. And, now it's kind of like, oh, well, I guess I could, maybe sign up my VA for that. But in years past, when we were in insurance, we did it on a Friday and then message everyone before the weekend. But, that was just a different time. So keep in mind that there's whatever works best for you guys, best practices. If you yourself will be out for the holidays, don't call during the holidays when you're on vacation. Maybe send a card out of, wishing you a happy winter or a happy last month of the year type card at the beginning of the month before you go out and travel, right? Like Mo, if you're going out to Europe or wherever in the world, and Philip's telling you or somebody's telling you, hey, you should make all your holiday calls. Forget about it. Just send out all of the Christmas cards and holiday cards and all that stuff a month before, and then disappear for the month, which is always cool, right? But we want to have a life worth living too, So always build your follow-up and your reconnecting your systems around your life schedule, especially if every year you're traveling most of the time. Let's see here. I know somebody was trying to jump on, but it looks like they jumped off. Here we go. Now closing. And this is to your point. What is the most effective, or what form do you think is most effective? Text message, email, phone call, in person. And one could argue any of these would work, right? Depending on the relationship. During the pandemic, all of it was phone call and Zoom, right? All of this applied during the pandemic, right? Like we secured every piece of business through text messaging, basically. It was like, hey, this is what we're gonna do it for. Convert to a phone call, convert to Zoom. Finally would see the house with like NASC and all this stuff on. And then, but by then we usually have the listing signed via DocuSign, right? Here's the big quote. In the end, if they can meet and have a good enough reason to meet, they will meet. And if they don't, they won't. And that's okay. You really don't care what their answer ultimately is, because you're not getting people to do anything they don't want to do. You're just going to ask and respond until they agree that meeting with you makes sense or it doesn't. Either way, you both win. And so ultimately what he's saying, you want to go in person. And that is where we're shifting back into. Now, granted, Monica and I still do Zoom appointments with clients because of distance. We do a lot of conference calls, but honestly, a lot of the heavy lifting for us is done over phone, text. Email, that's just like kind of information, but phone, text, Zoom conference, those are kind of the three that kind of get us 80% of the way, 90% of the way. And yes, we still meet the client eventually in person, and that will be the locking mechanism, the closing mechanism. Improve your conversion rate. So you'll hear people say, like, until you discover your conversion rate, just use the numbers 1 out of 100. Right? You guys heard early on in business, even if you're only making 5 calls a day, track the call. Like just hash them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then how many people answered 1, 2, 3, did any of them convert to an appointment? And then you start realizing who you're calling. Like early on, I would make 120 calls, right? This is cold call. So I dial 818-444, whatever. Call, leave a message. So out of 120, I got, maybe 50 people answering, another 40 people I would leave messages on. And out of the 50, I would get all these no's and maybe a couple follow-up. So then, okay, I'm starting to get numbers. So maybe every day that I was working cold calls or circle prospecting or just listed, just sold, whatever you want to call cold calls, I eventually call them gold calls, right? Just for my brain to kind of get me to do more of it. What I noticed was that I was still getting like the same 5 to 10, maybes, call me later, whatever. And then when I would call the people I did know, I couldn't get past 10 because everyone I called picked up the phone and we would talk, right? So it would take me 4 hours or 3 hours or 4 hours to get through 120 calls with so many no's, so many left messages, and a handful of conversations, which still added up to 50. But if I made 10 calls to people that did know me, that was open to taking a call from me, I could spend the same 4 hours talking to 10 people about their real estate goals, right? Or about real estate. I can talk shop. So immediately I realized, I can get referrals, I can get all this stuff, and I can make it all work with people I know, right? Improve your conversion rate, first and foremost, time block. Being systematic with your calendar, right? Being purposeful with your time. Now, I know for a lot of us, when we first start, there's a lot of moving parts. Like Moj reminded me that, oh my gosh, Philip, we got open house, we got our Supro, we got our MLS learning, we got our contracts learning, we got disclosure class with our broker, we have role playing, we got mindset, and you're probably feeling the same thing. And I agree, it's literally nonstop, right? Like, where does it all go? So what I did early on is that I took the training calendar at our office, and I took the training calendar at the board, and then I looked at my calendar and I said, okay, this is the time I take my son to school, naps, and this is the time I need to pick him up, right? So these two are non-negotiable. The time I take him to school, the time I pick him up, okay, that's in there, right? Then I started looking at training. Okay, where's all the training? Okay, the office has training at 8:30. Okay, I'm not gonna make that. I think early on I couldn't make that. But I said, I'm gonna put it in my calendar and I'm gonna do my best to get there. And though I couldn't get exactly at 8:30, I'd come in at 8:45. And I would stay from 8:45 to 9:30 for that first scripts and role play training, mindset training in my first office, right? Then 9:30 to like, except for Tuesdays or Wednesdays or something, but from 9:30 to 12, I would make my phone calls, 2.5 hours, right? And then from there, I jumped into whatever the next class was. And then some days a week, they had training at the board, and I would just go there. And then I learned to make my calls there, if I need someone to get there early. Use systems and conversions. This is basically KW Command. Connect with your whole database. This is really, it starts here on your phone. And if you're old school, maybe you got a Rolodex or an address book. Eventually convert that into your system, into your command base. And then lastly, prioritize qualified leads. Not everyone is equal, right? Like if you can either call me, who is a good friend, but nowhere on the market of selling, like I'm not going to move, or you can call Monica, who's also someone or maybe she was referred to you, and she's hot about selling because she's moving over to Canada, right? Like, who's the priority? Your friend who will always take your call and you're just going to talk, or is it the newest, hottest lead who says, yeah, I need to sell and move to Toronto, ASAP.
Right.
I don't care about the market, I'm going. So then she's probably going to be the priority. And by prioritizing and executing, now we're building on purpose. We're taking our best energy of our first 10 calls, that's probably our best energy, and we're going to get it to the highest priority people. Because I don't know if that makes sense.
It makes sense.
Okay, cool. I always hear people making these cold calls, and I'm like, oh, yeah. No, let's hit lead follow up first. So, and I would argue, if you're going to time block, especially as your prospecting and your follow up evolve, it's going to swap. Your follow up becomes the priority, and then your lead generation, following up your database systematically, calling new contacts, new leads, almost become not necessarily secondary, but they're very close. But it'll be your second time block or your third time block. Your first time block is preparation. Your second time block is preparation and practice. Let's just say that. Your second time block is your first and 10, your top 10 calls of the day, right? And then I would go into your lead follow-up pipeline, and then I would end with calling through your database or new calls that you're making around listing in your neighborhood, in your farm. So now you're touching people for a second, third, fourth time, or you're following up left messages that haven't answered yet. So that's kind of the priority there. Lead conversion model, capture the appropriate information to get a hold of the lead, connect to assess their needs and establish a relationship, cultivate the relationship. And numbers 2 and 4, really, this is where you're gonna spend most of your time, right? Like one's how do you capture the lead, whether it's a paid ad or however you know them or you know them already, you're gonna spend a lot of time here. And then close by asking for an appointment. Now you ask for an appointment by finding out they have a need or not. A lot of times it's by indirect messaging, indirect questions, you find out. Like I can go to you and say, hey, Joseph, hey, thanks for taking the call. This time I have a quick question for you. I know that the market's doing what it's doing, and I know you're not gonna, this is not the best time for you from our last conversation and everything that you have going on, you're rock solid with where you're at here. But I do have a question for you. Who do you know who may experience a major life event within the next 1 to 2 years that may need a move because of that life event? And then you stop and think about it, like, well, that's funny you mentioned that. I think my neighbor Philip is going through a divorce. No, not that we are, but but you might be able to bring it up. That's an indirect question. I'm not asking you. I'm asking indirectly around you. Who would you know that's going through a major life event or something that would trigger a move because of a major life event within the next 1 to 2 years, or if my coach says 2 to 3 years, right? So it's kind of further out in the future. And that's an indirect method, indirect question, but it still encapsulates you. Because you might think, I wasn't totally open to Philip, but I'm thinking of retiring in Guatemala, or whatever. And then you can bring that up to me, right? Because now you're not only thinking about the person around you, the people around you, you're also thinking about yourself in that mode. Ahas. So this is kind of the end. This is a shorter, the lead follow-up portion is a little bit on the shorter side. I wanted to ask you guys, how are you guys feeling with your contacts? Are you guys out there making any contacts with the people you know, or is there any kind of questions about the market that have come up that you need more clarity or clarification on?
Not so much on that, but I think the best way would be talking indirectly. I followed up with my superior, I would call it the superior to all the people that possibly may have the need for buying or selling, or even in this condition, even helping people who are renting. I think because the market, more people are looking to rent. But I'm being a little bit more aggressive on the phone calls I make. I just won't take no for an answer on that. What's the real, whether, because everyone has a need to purchase something or sell something.
Right.
Everybody has to live somewhere, so even if they're renting, or if they're living with their family member or something else, that's different. Or whether they don't need to rent or pass. And I try to convert people who are renting to possibly purchasing. I tell them, what have you thought about purchasing? And that direction.
A good one too is especially if they're leasing, is, hey Monica, what is your lease expire? And honestly, if it's more than 3 months, they're probably not going to drop it right away because it's so detrimental to do so. You got to keep all those months. But if they're within 3 months, 4 months, maybe I follow up the next month and see if they're open to a transition. Because here's my key factors: less than 3 month lease left over. And if their mortgage is more than $4,000, or their mortgage, their rent is more than $3,500, $4,000, they're definitely in the ballpark of buying a place potentially. Even if it's with down payment assistance, using their 401k, some of that money to go into it.
That's what I use also as a cultivating. I told them there's some programs that may give you down payment assistance for some home buyers. So I put the seed in their head. And they're also, you can talk to your accountant, you have to put that in, and there are some taxes